Storm King Comics.
Welcome everybody to the virtual edition of San Diego Comic-Con 2020. This panel and the trailer that you just saw is to promote the John Carpenter Tales of Science Fiction Vortex 2.0, which is the secondary story arc in a storyline of a space station that had an incident 20 years ago. Huge explosions, things died, few survivors, and the vortex has reopened. And here we are with the entire creative team and a special guest, Sobczak, who is our project manager who makes everything go. So not only do you get to talk in this panel to the writers, the artists, the letters, the colors, the editors, but you get everybody. My name is Lys Galati. I'm the publicist. I'm the least interesting person here. I'm going to let everybody take a moment and introduce themselves. Sandy, would you like to start?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Sizemore. I'm the writer.
Excellent.
I'm Sandy King. I'm the publisher and editor. Sean, you're next.
Sean Sobczak. I'm the project manager, designer.
Pete.
Okay, I'll go. I'm Dave Kennedy. I'm the artist on Vortex, and I'll hand you over to my brother, Pete.
I'm Pete. I am the color artist on Vortex.
And I'm Janice Chiang, the letterer for Vortex 2.0 and all the comics that come out of Storm King. I'm the lettering department.
I took a brief moment to add cover artists behind my name, so hopefully.
Oh, it showed up. Great.
That does the job.
Yeah.
Without too much.
For sure. Yay. So, obviously it's the continuation of a storyline. What was it about this title that made it something that we wanted to reopen and re-explore?
It's like a micro question, definitely.
Okay. Well, from a writing perspective, we'd done a pretty good job of finishing Vortex, I thought. It has a definite ending. And I didn't think we'd revisit it, but what annoyed me slightly were a couple of characters that I had penned in from the very beginning that were going to die horribly, managed to get out of everything that I put them in, and they kept escaping. So this, for me, is an opportunity to throw them back into the mill and see if they can get out in one piece again.
Now, does that include like a Willow Sinclair or I forget the doctor's name that kind of starts the whole infection? Because despite the fact that they were infected, they don't go away. But that's
because it's
a disease, right?
Because it's a horror comic, we get to do I think that interesting thing where you can bring people back from the dead if you need to. But they tend to come back a little bit differently than they started.
A bit differently, yeah, that's good.
it was also an opportunity to bring back someone from the first volume that didn't play a huge part, but is kind of right centrally at the heart of Vortex 2. But I won't spoil who that is. But you probably you wouldn't have been expecting to see this particular character kind of come back. I don't think. But yeah, it's been a fun mission to kind of assemble a slightly different team around the same central character from the first one.
The whole group in this one is you have a rather eclectic gang of heroes in this one. It's pretty cool.
Well,
yeah, and
Michael,
I think
brought
also
back a great storyline that we talked about since the beginning, that he's able to emphasize in this second volume.
Yeah, I think in the influences that are really front and center in Vortex 1 are kind of old sci-fi movies from the 50s that I'd been talking with before Vortex was even a glint in anyone's eye. I was having a conversation with John and Sandy about films that we all love back from the 50s. And one of the things that also cropped up in conversation was the Fugitive TV show from the 60s. And that was going to be a big part of Vortex Volume 1. And it kind of got pushed to the side. There was an investigation in that story arc, but it kind of resolved itself a little bit more quickly. So we kind of hit the ground running with more of a fugitive style storyline for the second book, because it's one of the things that I wanted to deliver. So it's been nice to go back and put that back in.
A bit of a chase from the start in 2.0.
Right.
Yeah, well, I felt, because if you've read the first one, you kind of know everything that Dixon's been through. So kind of like dropping him in and just seeing what happens to him, I think has been a lot of fun this time. We'd have to build his character up quite as much.
Excellent.
Agreed, and I think that one of the fun things about the book is that you do not have you can jump in right at 2.0. You don't have to have read the first series. Don't get me wrong, the first series is amazing. I highly recommend it. But anybody can jump on, and we do want to emphasize that this story is definitely something for mature audiences. It's not recommended for your kids. Just FYI, we've been joking around interlocking skeletons.
Sorry, Liz. I think that idea of jumping into a comic is something that is quite unique to comics. Just talking with someone the other day with regards to comics we all sort of grew up on, and usually nobody ever really starts at number one. Nobody has the sort of foresight as a kid to go, I better start at number one and work my way through everything. I think there's fun to be had in just finding a comic, picking it up, diving in, and then going on from there to explore further.
Bring the rest of the treasure.
Yeah, so you may find that you head into this at issue 3 or something, but there'll be something in there. There's something in every issue that's packed enough for you to be able to say, right, I need to see the rest of the story, or I want to expand and go and see what else these guys are producing.
I think you are 100% right, and I think that's part of the appeal of comic shops, is that you hear about something, maybe you see that issue, then you got to go find all the rest of it. That brings me to Sean. You have been at the beginning of this. You've seen the evolution of all this, and now we are, doing a lot of retailer outreach. What are the things that you think appeal? What is something about this line that you think retailers would really, why they should jump on this immediately, and something from a retail level? And you're not only the person behind the scenes, but you're also the person who's dealing with retail. What have you seen retailer response like? What do you think? Is there something specific about this storyline that you think would appeal to them?
And what's our next thing? What are we gonna do next? And then thank God Sandy came along, and she was like, I'm going to do science fiction comics, and I was like, bless your heart, because there needs to be a home for great science fiction in the sequential world, and right now, Storm King's the only one really knocking it out of the park on that level.
Yeah, people hopped on me before anthology market. Horror's having a big moment in movies and a big resurgence there, but sci-fi didn't seem to, they haven't caught up to it yet. So I feel like we've got our groove on there. Plus, there's just cool stories that haven't been told in a while. And by encouraging the different writers to think of all the different forms of sci-fi, the interior science fiction, the outer space science fiction, the on-Earth science fiction, the small and invading horrible germ science fiction, I think that we're kind of...
Yeah, you have your sterile kind of space-going science fiction, then you have your kind of bio science fiction with creatures and things like that, things that escape, we'll say, like germs that go out of control, or viruses that go out of control. Shocking how timely that is right now. But there's so many elements to science fiction, whether it's hard-boiled or science fiction fantasy or science fiction horror. That's the beautiful thing about that science fiction setting. It's the new Western for me, which I think it was when, in the 50s, it was, you have to find something interesting to tell your story in a setting that's interesting. Science fiction offers that times 1,000.
Yeah, and I think these stuff like Vortex, where you'd be claustrophobic in outer space at the same time.
I think that fear as well ties into something that we're all aware of, which is that we've got John's name on the front of the book. We've got to sort of reflect the work of his that we know and love. It's his name that we're living up to, and it's nice to know everyone's on that page as well. But we know it's science fiction. We know that we can do whatever we want with science fiction and go in any direction. But we also know that there are expectations there. There are sort of there are things that we're going to do that are going to have to come up to John's standard anyway. And it's nice to know that everyone's got that in mind as we sort of dive into this stuff too.
It's really good to have a bar to aspire to, and I think we all feel that. Anyone who works on these books feels that responsibility.
I think that's what makes it
that's what makes
the teams we put together are working for something bigger. We're working for the audience. We're working for the satisfaction of a story well told. And that's always going to reflect well on John.
I think
oh, for sure.
We have really good stories too within that sci-fi genre. We're not doing sci-fi just to show cool spaceships or a crazy future. They're really solid stories within that background.
Yeah, I mean, when each writer is proposing something, the story has to hold up first. And then in matching up the artists and the writers, or in this case, the team comes to me, it's got to all come together that way, because who we're serving is the reader. We've got to show them a great time. Money's tight. You want them to really feel like they got their $4 worth, their $25 worth, their $35 worth, whatever they're buying, the trades or the single issue floppies. You want them to feel like, wow, I got something that showed me a great night, that showed me a great week of reading. And there's nothing better than when somebody buys a book from you and holds it to their chest and is really excited that they got it.
Yeah.
That's what you want. You want them to have that book under their bed, in their long box, in their most cherished place, and you want them excited that they got it and happy that they got it, because, I'm really aware that it's people's art. We're taking them to the place.
Yeah, definitely. I think that sorry, that does feed what we all do too. The amount of times I've had a page that I can't get right because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the action is doing what the action needs to do. Mike's explained it in a few words, and my art isn't doing it, and I have to just scrap the page because it's got to be that book that sits under somebody's bed, like you say, Sandy. It's got to be the thing that they go back to and say, you know what my favorite bit was? It was that page that guy loved to draw, you know? So it's right, it feeds everything you do, every department.
I find myself constantly editing myself, you know, like exactly what you just said. That's just not going to fit the bill, whether it's, you know, there's no explanation for it. You just know when it's not working. And
yeah, you've got to love it yourself. Yeah.
So the amazing part about the art that Dave and Pete do, I look at the file like half an hour when I'm lettering, and then I come back in different stages for corrections. I find something new every time.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, look at that. You know? And I think when readers bring it to their heart, it's a word of mouth also that they want to share with their friends, like a treasure they found. You know, look at this, you know, check it out. And that's a quality we all strive for and proudly do.
There is nothing better than that. And that's something that you can't replicate. That is something that you can't buy. Is that geek, it just, I have to have it. You find that issue 3, you gotta have the whole line. If you gotta get that signed copy, there is nothing better than that. And I will tell you, from a promotion standpoint, that's explosive. That is what you strive for. So talking about all of this, Dave and Pete, you are brothers. You are brothers working together. When you are, you're working to edit yourself, make it the best out of you. Do you guys compete? What's your vibe? Like, are you constantly kind of trying to one up each other, or is it super complimentary?
No, we don't compete. I'm the best.
No, it's wrong.
Oh, that's the older brother talking, right?
They're actually on different sides of the same studio. It looks like they're in different
locations. What's 5,000 doing now? Yeah. No. There's no competition there. It's exactly what we've just talked about. We both are aiming at the same thing. You know, we do go back and forth. I'll suggest something to Pete. He'll say, "Oh, wait a minute, I've got a better idea," and more often than not, he'll remind me of something I've forgotten to draw, and I'll go back and change what I've done. So it's like with every member of the team. It's
that collaboration. Like if one of us is just doing it just to do it, and then the other person has no interest in doing it either. Whereas when I get stuff from Dave and it looks great, there's no point me working on it if I don't try my best to not improve it, but like add to how good it looks. So
you got to hold up your card. Otherwise, Sandy's going to trim the fat from the herd.
And we all know who that'll be, because I'm just asking.
Whatever.
No, I think this back and forth process is very organic. And it's, if you imagine a sculptor working with clay or stone, it's a process of putting back, and refining. So I feel the caliber of our team, that's mode we work in. Even up to the level of the editing. I'll go through first round corrections and proofreading from Sean's notes, and everyone on the team pitches in also, so that there's always a chance for either Mike to, take away a copy or add a copy to sharpen the storyline.
It's like we all have each other's backs.
What?
Yeah.
It's like we all have each other's backs.
We do.
Yeah.
I feel the best safety net with this team. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I think that's very rare.
And you can tell where everybody is and everybody's work habits, because both my messages and my emails are dinging around the clock with someone going, "You up? Have you seen this? Take a look over here. What do you think?" And it's happening around the world. The irony is the ones who are in the middle of the night are usually in my same time zone, Mr. Bradstreet. And I'm going, you can see who's rummaging, or in Sean's case, I can see my Dropbox changing all night long, like a mad squirrel is going through it.
Sometimes I want to put a sticky note in the corner because I'm looking.
You can monitor it, you monitor the whole.
And as though I'm not, noticing it, and then a message will pop up like, you checked out the Dropbox lately? No kidding.
I think for me, one of the funnest parts of the whole experience of putting an issue together, because I see Dave and Pete's work in flow. You know, like from the thumbnails, I see everything happening almost in real time as it comes in. But then it's when Tim's covers drop.
Oh yeah,
and that for me is like the fun, like jaw-dropping bit, because I never know what to really expect. But what Tim does that is great is he'll take 24 pages of story where an awful lot happens, and he'll just find that one image that just takes the entire issue, and it's so important because it's a lot of the time it's the first thing that the readers are going to see, especially casual readers who might be walking through the comic store, and then they're kind of like, oh, what was that? And it's so cool when those covers drop, Tim. I don't think I've ever said that to you before, but it's great.
Well, you know, you kind of said it too. It's the first thing the readers see. So, you know, you have a different kind of set of parameters in your head when you're doing a cover than when you're doing the interiors, where you really want to be literal as you can to the words that you're. And I do too. You know, continuity is very important. But sometimes you have to kind of sidestep that for the sake of that one moment you have, or you know, that moment that speaks to, you know, me, but also speaks for the series, you know, and I don't always get it right, but you know, I think more often than not, I have my finger on the pulse of that.
You want people to feel that cover wasn't just a story that didn't pay off inside. You want it organic so that it reflected the story. And, you know, because there's nothing like the Sucker Punch comics where there's a really cool cover, but then it's like, oh, you know, it was selling you a piece of crap. So the deal that I really like is that Tim's really in tune with what we're presenting. And it is synthesizing what we've put together, and it is like, here's your issue. And it's organically part of it. So it's a different style, but it's an introduction to what's coming. And
like setting the mood rather than having two figures on the front saying, I'm going to get you, or you'll never get me, or
right.
It sets the tone.
I think the strength of Tim's covers, it's a promising delivery. You see that, you pick it up, and when you read it to the end, it's like, yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Just want to give the potential buyer a peek into our world,
right,
and enough to intrigue them.
Yeah,
it has to be said though, Tim. There are a few times I've hovered over the keyboard thinking, do I need to do any art for this issue? Because I think you just got it all there. You know, I'll just do I do the end panel. You know,
A one-page comic.
Yes. Yes. I mean, there's times where I'll sit. I remember in Vortex 1, there were times where I sit there and go, "Good God, floor tiles! The floor tiles in this ship. David must have gone insane." You know,
Look, it looks like someone spilled a V8 over on that tile. You know,
wow. And there's
but it comes back to that thing of, I want somebody who's going to pick that up in 5 years' time to still think that it's the best thing that they bought at the time, you know.
The level of detail is pretty impressive.
And the interesting thing is when Janice gets her hands on it, what comes alive? You know, where we then finally, you know, really rise, because you know we've got the script, we've got the amazing art, but then Janice's sensitivity to the voices really makes you go wow by the end of, you know, each chapter, because she has
and that brings us to the tone. Yeah, she totally gets the tone, the lettering, and that brings me to a question for Pete and Janice. You know, comic fans grow up, they want to be the artist, they want to be the writer, but there's a whole other world to making comics. You know, lettering, coloring. How did you guys How did you guys fall into doing that for a living? Was there something that inspired you?
Well, luckily I have a very good artist brother who needed some additional art, helping him to keep up with the pace of stuff that he needed to produce. But it's really Dave and my love of comics that's got me into like looking for color works in other things, like going back through all the stuff that we love, looking at Hellboy, looking at Invincible, looking at everything else that we've ingested over the years. But also, like, we're both massively into film as well, so there's things where go and look at Soderbergh, or go and look at like the Alien franchise, or look at how things work in the Matrix and stuff. Color-wise, there's so many different influences you can get from everywhere for sticking into the comic world.
Well, and I think because a lot of your influences are really filmic. And I always think of colorists as essentially our lighting directors, because they really start throwing us the dimensions and the lights and shadows on top of the other art.
We see that there are sound and music, I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes, without question. And I think that is what makes Storm King really stand out, is every title, regardless of subject matter, regardless of storyline, has that attention to detail that you are watching a movie. It just happens to be in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, and the key thing here with this stable of people we have on this creative team, and I think this is true of a lot of our creative teams, Sandy, is that each of these elements are specialists. You know, I mean, we're all students of the game. We can all wear more than one hat, I think. So, you know, like that's the beauty of what Janice does too, is she's attuned to what she's doing. So she brings a certain angle in when she's, you know, kind of trying to pick out what she's going to really play up or what she's not. And I think the same thing is true of the color. Each of these things are different devices of storytelling that we can do different things in. And it's not just, you know, lettering and simple color. There's just, luckily we've got brains behind it, you know?
Well, yeah. And from the beginning, from the very first comic Asylum, when I was putting together any team, I put it together the same way we put our film crews together.
Yeah.
Who's bringing?
It's casting.
Yeah. Who brings which textures together to tell that story the right way? And to me, that's the fun of it. And I think Sean knows this, you know, because he works on the films with me and on the comics, that the whole mindset each time we have a different story coming in is who best tells the story with the textures, with the lights, with the sounds. And the interesting thing about Janice is she essentially works with all the teams and has to hear the different voices who are speaking in all of these. You know, she's like a sound designer coming in. And it's been really interesting to me in Vortex 2 that there really are different voices that she has modeled this time. And Liz, I think you were mentioning how you could hear a couple of the characters in your mind immediately.
This issue, I have been working in comics for 20 years. I have only had the immersive experience of just being so in a world that you can hear what's going on with it. It has happened to me 3 times in 20 years. This book is number 3. The only other ones was 1 issue of Transmet and The Killing Joke. That's it. That's how good this book is. Go to stores, stormkingscomics.com, get this book.
So I started lettering by mistake. I'm not a comic fan.
You can't make comics by mistake.
I just stumbled into comic lettering. It wasn't like I woke up one day and I said, I would be the best letterer.
She woke up one morning and Steve Lealoho was like, I need someone to letter this book. I don't have time.
No, basically, my background's fine arts. And I always loved letter forms because of the ability to communicate with them. So, you know, I've done anything that you can letter. Well, my first hand was Chinese calligraphy that my father taught me how to use a brush. So every stroke counts. And within a Chinese character, there's a few radicals. Because when you see a Chinese character, it's a concept. It's not just like a vowel or a vowel or a letter form. So when I work on the sound effects, I really have to feel it. It's the same thing with David. We have to really.
Well, it's true. I think of all of us that at some point we stop being the amalgam of our influences, and we start to kind of forge our own path with that. So, in a sense, I'm not looking at anything else. I don't, maybe Dave does. I don't know, but I think in many cases, once we've kind of figured out the chops of what we do, it's all about then evolving ourselves. And so we live in that world to a degree. So it is all just at that point, I think, coming through our own kind of unique filters.
I think at that point you become your own master and you're breaking new territory. That's what we're interested in. We don't want to see something we've done. It's like a lot of big comic companies, they have like certain templates for sound effects and balloons, and I could look at a book and know where it came from without looking at the characters. Like, okay. So I tell people, I never say the sound effect. You take away the fun and the challenge. If you have a book full of sound effects that you like bring out and place on top, it looks mechanical. It doesn't work with the art. It's like,
I wish they had a Mad Magnet.
Yeah.
But I think that
it's like Bam Pow is only fun so many times, and then you're like, okay, I'm bored. Something.
I'm a massive
it's time
fan of Bracca. Yeah. I've been using that a lot on rifles. Bracca. Yes. It may mean something somewhere in Greek or something. I'm sorry if I offend anybody by the overuse of braccas, but there's so much fun to be had with finding a sound effect that works. It does cause odd conversations with the wife, and she'll come in and say, "Why are you f***ing?" And because I'm trying to find out how a door sounds when it's closing. It's
easier for you to use those go-tos when you're in science fiction because you can make any sound effect you want for it. Like,
yeah.
Because if you were doing it with any normal amount of like weapons that exist, I'd be going, no wait, this one needs to be a brap.
Yeah.
For Storm Kids Comics, for the Monica Blue series, where the werewolves are communicating, it's all by sound. They don't literally have balloons. They're talking. They're growling and such. So it's like I'm thinking in my head. Sometimes I have to sound it out loud, but it was a challenge. So like, how do you make them happy? How do you make them angry? They're really angry. They're fighting.
I would love to see like just a video of Janice sitting there trying to make different voices.
Oh my gosh, she has gas cans. What is this?
Janice with the artist in the
studio.
I absolutely thought balloons going all the time.
No idea what a sound effect should be on something I've written. I just go, I don't know. It's kind of like,
that's that's Janice's job. So I have a question for everybody. I've got a question for everybody except Sandy. This is not a question for Sandy. It is about Sandy. So we always say that the line is from the mind of John Carpenter and the heart of Sandy King. Where do you see?
I'm brainless now.
Yes, we want to. But what would you guys say is what is the heart of Sandy King? How is that reflected in Storm King in the books?
Can I start? Just
sure.
Because I'm over here on the Ma Brady spot. So, for me, you kind of put the finger on it a little bit earlier, because you have to understand that she's a producer, but she's an on-set producer too. She's you can say den mother, you can say ringleader, you can use a lot of different adjectives for it, but she is the puppet master in a way. She knows how to kind of direct her troops. She's good at it. And it doesn't matter that she walked from film into comics. because it's all the same language. And she's an art school girl, you know, she's a punk rocker. So she speaks our language too, and I think that and creatives usually know how to communicate in a shorthand that way. And Sandy just has a massive gift for it. She cares about everything she does, which is the difference between her, what she does, and for Storm King, and I think that what someone's doing just as a job, just to kind of be, you know, to collect a paycheck. That's kind of doesn't even exist in this reality that we're in.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that I've both been lucky enough to sit in on TV and movie production meetings with Sandy and John, and I've also been unlucky enough to sit in on meetings without them. And what I appreciate is, as a Brit coming to LA for the first time, I had a lot of meetings, and I came away feeling great because everyone said yes to everything. It was brilliant. And then nothing happened. And it took me 4 or 5 trips to get my head around the fact that everyone is full of BS. No one tells it like it is. Everyone just wants to keep everyone happy, and nothing gets made. And the great thing about sitting in on meetings with Sandy and John is they just say it like it is. I've seen them walk out on people who are just talking nonsense.
You get the unfiltered version as you're walking out of the building.
It's brilliant. And the great thing about that is, I know that when Sandy or John tell me that something is working, if I've done something well, it actually means something. And I also know that if they're telling me to take it in a slightly different direction, it's because it's wrong. And that's, I don't really get that anywhere else. You only find out when it's too late that something's gone wrong, whereas Sandy can just hone in on it, you know, in the early stage and course correct, and it's almost unique in my experience.
Yeah, and you're never bullied by that. It never feels like you're being slapped down. It feels like they made whatever decision they've made makes complete sense, and you're like, why didn't I think of that? So
yeah, you appreciate it.
A lot of the things.
Yeah.
See, I have a slightly different view, not having anything to do with the cinematic industry or the circles that you guys travel in. Working remotely here, it's kind of nice just having.
He's visiting.
Hi, John.
Here comes the specter.
Hi, John.
Hi, guys.
We're saying good things about your wife.
Great Sandy hour. Well, I was going to say about Sandy and John, that working remotely here, it's just nice to know that they're letting us get on with it. I've worked for so many people in the past who have hired me for the thing that they want in their head, whereas these guys have hired us to do what we do and to put all that together. So they've hired a letterer who they know can letter, they've hired a cover artist who they know what they're doing, and that gives you more confidence, you know.
I was just talking about this with David Scow, and the same is true of Sandy. She knows full well that she's just handed off the baton to us, and that now we're running with it. And that takes a lot of trust, huge amount of trust for someone to hand off their baby to someone. And that, I mean, you have to respect that, because they kind of understand that artists have to be able to run. And, you know, I think the other analogy I made was, I always feel like, you know, I'm always worried about tripping. And then over your shoulder, you hear Sandy going, "Don't worry about tripping, just run, you idiot."
Straight up. I get that at a non-artistic level too.
Yeah.
I'd say
Can I also say that Sandy makes the best mac and cheese that I have ever had in my life. I mean, she looks after me when I'm in LA. I dream about that mac and cheese. It's so good.
She doesn't have to worry about the mother hen syndrome, because she's always got kids coming in and out of there. You know, we're all her children in a way.
I would just speak about my experience with Sandy. I said to her at our first New York Comic Con, if all the struggle and things I learned in 40 years in the industry And almost a time where I was like kicked in the gutter and stabbed and came back. It was worth it to meet someone like her. Like, thank God I held on to somebody like really great, really genuine to the core.
Those relationships are rare, aren't they, Janice?
They are. And it's like, it's more precious than gold. It's something that can't be named. But I really, really am growing under your aegis, because I'm allowed to say or look at something and let her interpret it the way I feel it should be interpreted, instead of being micromanaged. Everybody knows that word.
Don't ask Sean this question,
I've
because
always thought that artists do better when they're allowed to do what they do best. And, I think it shows at Storm King. It proves my theory.
It shows in every single thing. Sean has a different experience. Sean has been working with Sandy longer than the rest of us. So what's your answer to
you're definitely more on the
question?
production side.
She puts together great teams. She knows people well, and I think a couple of you said that she puts together great teams of competent people. But it always has a family feel to it, which is wonderful. And this is going back to films, like the first few films I worked on with them. We had a lot of the same people that came on and worked, and you knew these people and you trusted these people, and it really was a family environment. And I feel that way with comic books too. Like looking around at you guys, it's for this period of Tales of Sci-Fi, you're my family right now, and she's really good at putting together solid groups of people and knowing that we can all trust one another. And she has an encyclopedic knowledge of not just film, and not just horror, but film, and knows good stories and always pulls out great stories for our online.
That's where it all starts.
Absolutely. So what, you guys are home, you're isolated, you're working from home. What are you listening to while you're working?
It's a podcast for me. That's the way I work. If I've got music's great as well, don't get me wrong, but podcasts fuel me, especially if they're comics based. I can't do them while I'm thumbnailing because I tend to get totally distracted. But once the art starts, then it's 11 o'clock comics is the big one. And then we've got a couple of the UK ones which I really enjoy, which is Never Iron Anything, which is these guys who just pick a classic comic, sit down and talk about it for hours on end. And the Awesome Comics podcast as well, which is just you guys who love comics and talk about it. So there's fuel there, as I'm sort of working. I'll be talking about something I've never heard of before. I need to go and check that out, and maybe I'll grab it digitally while I'm supposed to be drawing. But it's all inspiration, That's
for me. I have two distinct stages for music. When I'm writing something new, I listen to a Scandinavian radio show that just plays old school metal, because I'm a big heavy metal fan.
Old school, not like black or dark.
Like Black Sabbath, onwards. Not much new stuff. So I'm so familiar with all that music that I can listen to it and I can sing along, but it's a different part of my brain from the bit that's actually coming up with. If it was a new song, then my brain gets frazzled and I get distracted. But then when I finished an issue and I'm making sure that it works, it's when I go to John's Lost Themes. Because Vortex was, the name came from one of John's compositions on Lost Themes. So it's cool to work on a book that already has its own soundtrack. And when I think I've finished, I put that track on repeat and I read and read and reread until I get the rhythm correct. And usually I have to noodle around with the language and make sure it all fits in my mind when the music's on. But it just makes sure that it's kind of like Dave was saying about John's name being on the cover. I just want to make sure as much of the worlds that he creates somehow stuck in the writing, if that makes sense.
It's true. John's style is so distinctive as a filmmaker. His voice is very large because he does control the music. There's a specific vibe to John's creations. They're uniquely his, and they're easily identifiable because of that. And I always think, how are we going to inject that vibe into these comics? And it's like this conundrum, that I can't solve. And then I finally got to the point where I'm like, well, it's just by doing good work. You start with this great story, you follow it up with whatever you have to build that world, to create that world of myths. And John's name above it kind of does a lot of that work for us.
There's, kids watching, there's families watching, it's a little uncertain times and things are a little scary right now. What would you like to tell people at home?
Well,
can you go shopping for me? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'll get some chips for you while I'm out. My advice is, look to science fiction horror itself and adapt and survive. My wife and I have this conversation quite a lot. What happens if we don't ever come out of this? Then we just have to carry on. We just have to find a way to carry on. It means we're in masks for a few years or whatever it is. We will carry on. Adapting and surviving is what people are good at. And stick with it.
It'd be like that opening sequence in, I'm going to forget the name of the movie now. It's only Terry Gilliam. Yeah, I mean, it's we live in this world anyway. We're kind of shut in.
Yeah.
So in a sense, this lockdown, this quarantine, it doesn't really affect my life to a huge degree, other than affecting my wife and daughter's lives and upsetting their natural rhythms. For me, heck, I'm right in my wheelhouse. I'm like, don't mess with me, don't talk to me, let me do what I'm doing over here. And you're right, it is kind of almost a science fiction world out there to a degree, Except we're the people that watch the pandemic movies and the science, like all these things that have been happening for the last 10 or 15 years, from Contagion to whatever sci-fi channel is got on this week. So in a sense, like we've already practiced this pandemic thing. It's been rehearsed in our mind a dozen times from just the media we take in.
Yeah.
No, we're living a cartoon. And, it's the virus or us, it's the evil empire or us. It's, I'm waiting for the locust plague from Africa to hit.
Murder hornet.
And I think it's, yeah, killer hornets. I mean, come on. So, I've always said nothing we can create is as scary as reality. So we're just living it out.
It's funny how that never really resonated with me until the last 10 years. And that, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, I was living in a little dream world, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And I think that we do a service to our storytelling. Horror has always been allegorical. Science fiction's always been our dreams. And Storm King, as Liz always says, we make every dream a nightmare.
Good times.
I think we're trying right now to really support our local comic shops and the comic shops all across the nation that took a big hit. The ones both that took the financial hit from the close downs and the ones that took a hit during some of the riots. And, they're great gathering places spiritually for their communities. They've been there for kids growing up. Our local one, Golden Apple, was where our kids went growing up. There's Four Color Fantasies out in Inland Empire that a lot of them have their game nights and those things, and eventually those things will come back if we can support them as artists. And I think again, the comics community, movie communities are small towns.
Those shops do have a cultural identity, It's really interesting.
The more we can do to support them, we're actually supporting our communities and our own kids.
Truthfully,
there is nothing like physically having that book. When we finished Vortex 1 and we got the trades here. I've got a 3-year-old son who's considered to be quite handsome, and I'm more proud of Vortex 1 than I am of my son. I'm more proud of Vortex 1 than I am of my son, mainly because my book Vortex didn't draw on my TV with crayons when he first arrived. So, but the book itself is the amalgam of everything we've put into it for the past year or so. You know, it's a physical, beautiful thing to have. There's nothing, like you say, Sandy, there's nothing better than physically having that book in your hand.
Yeah.
It's true, you know, it's like
well, I think there's also
screenwriters over the last couple of years that are kind of breaking into comics. And they're more excited about their comic than a movie when it puts off. You know, they're like, I slept with my comic underneath my pillow last night. I'm like, that's awesome. And I mean, because I'm like, well, you just experienced what it's like to have creative control over what you just wrote.
Yes.
You know, I mean, without any hiccups, without 2,500 meetings, without, you know, and there's a purity to it, you know.
That's the fun.
Enjoy it.
That's the fun part. We make something, we make it in our image, we put it out there for better or for worse. It's our vision.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of comics.
There's a purity. It's unmarred by the 18-headed approval machine.
Yeah. It's not compromised.
Well, I think
for whatever it is,
it's not
compromised. It's there.
But it's more than that. I think the beauty of comics is as we have I think you guys put it absolutely right, that Sandy has a lot of punk rock in her, and comics by a medium are an act of rebellion, and that might be a rebellion against a supervillain or an evil corporate empire, but they are in and of themselves something that you can hold in your hand and explore a world that you could never, ever, ever survive in some cases, but you survive it within those pages. And you can tell yourself, you're reading this gory, you know, interlocking skeletons, you know, isolation horror, body horror, and because you can hold it in your hands, there's a suspension of disbelief. And it is why comic fans will always keep coming back to comics.
Great.
So we are winding up. I would like everybody, if you wouldn't mind, how can people find you if they want to see what you're doing?
Twitter for me is the easiest place. I'm Sizemore on Twitter. That's nice and easy.
Oh, okay, cool.
Pete and Dave are just on different sides of the same studio.
Yeah. If you want to find me, find Pete first, and then I'll be next to him. If you want to find me, go visit me at Cherry Sherry somewhere.
Yay. Look for Storm King Comics.
I'm Pete K. Media on Instagram and on Facebook as well.
I like that Pete, the colorist, right? Our color artist for this series is got the "It's Too Orangey" T-shirt.
Too orangey, gross. That's a reference to an old advert from the 70s and Spaced, the TV show as well.
Too orangey.
How should we find you, Janice?
Oh, I'm on Twitter, the Janice Chiang. I should be kind of, and I have a fan page on Facebook that people can reach me.
All right, so retailers, Sean, how do we contact Sean for all of the good stuff?
Sean at stormkingproductions.com and also stormkingcomics.com.
And how's the website going? Like
website's great.
Yeah. Well, is there a lot of interactive stuff on it?
There's all the trailers that Antoine's been doing are up for each section. Sections for each book. Little synopsis and images from the inside and your covers.
So is that a good resource for people that aren't familiar with the books to go kind of get a little bit of a taste?
Yeah, it's better than our web store. It directs you to the web store, but it gives you more info than the actual store does. You get to see
there's lots of good visuals and all that.
Yeah, a little more
I
inside.
haven't really checked out the website, but I was just curious because, you know, whenever you're a boutique company or a small publisher or a mini major, your identity is the first thing you have to kind of sell to people, you know, I think I was at the website a couple times when we were doing motion, you know, like enhanced covers and things like that. But it's something I should probably get. I have had a social media presence for a long time, and I've kind of stepped back from it a little bit. So I'm not easily contactable necessarily. You can always find me online. My stuff's always open.
You know, we're about to launch our Storm King app, and that'll have a lot more interactive stuff and things to do. But really, the website's got everything right now.
Definitely good place to go. Thank you guys so much. This was so much fun.
Great to see everybody.
You know, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right.
And Mike
Storm King Comics, every dream.
We're going to talk metal next time we get together, my friend.
Oh yeah, cool.
And old 50s.
Dig it.
Bye, guys.
Sounds good. Take care. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.